Hi everyone, welcome to week 9. This week we're going to talk about everyday life, intercultural relationships. So hopefully this is pretty interesting for you. Um, the chapter opened talking about the benefits of intercultural relationships. And so an intercultural relationship could be a friendship, could be a dating relationship, it could be a work relationship. And this is any time that there are different cultural perspectives. So age, physical ability, gender, ethnicity, race, etc. And so the key to these relationships is the balancing of differences and similarities. Uh, a particular point to keep in mind is that intercultural relationships can offer a lot of benefits, and a lot of you guys have written about this in your reaction papers. That you can gain a lot of information about different cultures and different languages and different places in the world. You can learn a lot about what it's like to be not in the dominant culture in a particular environment, but also that you learn a lot um, from history, I guess is a good way to put it. That you learn a little bit about the history of somebody else's experience. Also, really importantly, it's breaking stereotypes and that you're acquiring new skills. And that once you start opening up to being in intercultural relationships, it can perpetuate having more intercultural relationships. However, as you guys are probably well aware, there are a lot of barriers to intercultural relationships. So people have to be motivated. Um, there has to be a desire for somebody to build a relationship across a cultural boundary. Also, the places where people are. If people are in schools that are segregated, not formally, but by the neighborhoods people live in and the parts of the country people live in, they're probably not going to have as much exposure to people that are different from them. Also, there's differences in the styles that people communicate and also the value systems that they hold. And so this can be a real challenge when trying to have an intercultural relationship because people are coming from really different perspectives. Also, people hold stereotypes that may or may not be true, and it can be really hard for people to get over those to establish a friendship. People also have a lot of anxiety about making an intercultural friendship. They worry about the negative consequences of having this friendship, that maybe sometimes people might judge them for being in an intercultural relationship, and that they're worried what their family and friends think, what people on the street think, and that especially if people have had previous reactions that they've heard, for example, someone in their family talking about a cousin that's dating interculturally, that they say that's not okay, it's going to make people less inclined to want to engage in it themselves. Also, it's sometimes uncomfortable for people to know how to approach other people's cultural identities, how to talk about their race or ethnicity or whatever the difference is in a meaningful way without seeming offensive. Um, also, intercultural relationships take more work because of these boundaries, and so some of this work can force people to have to explain some of their actions, and that can be uncomfortable for people. Um, and then, as I mentioned, sometimes you're in majority communities where maybe it's inappropriate in a majority community for somebody to span these boundaries, and that can be a real barrier. So generally, when people get into relationships, they develop because of frequency of contact, physical attraction, similarity, and then complementarity. So there's this idea called the similarity principle that we tend to be attracted to people that we perceive as holding attitudes similar to ourselves. So if you kind of get to know somebody in a class and their opinions kind of match up with yours, you're going to be more inclined to like them than somebody whose opinions are different than yours. We also do this because it confirms our own beliefs a lot. And also, it's really comfortable. If you know that this person holds similar political beliefs or religious beliefs to you, it's easier for you to predict what they're going to do, which makes people feel much more comfortable. Also, it reinforces things about yourself that you're like, okay, well, if this person is like me in this way, that's good. That means I'm okay. Complementarity is a different side of this, that we're attracted to people that are somewhat different from ourselves. So, this idea that opposites attract. And so, these differences provide balance for us, and that it can be really interesting for us to be friends or date people that are a little bit different. Now, speaking of friendship, friendship is really culturally bound. So in the US, this term friend is a very broad term. It can be a lot of different relationships. And even if we look now on Facebook and things like that, you have friends that your friendship with some random person on Facebook is quite different than your friendship with your childhood best friend. But we use the same term in English in the US. In other cultures, that's not the case. There's a lot of different terms for these things. Um, and that a lot of people globally, what they would consider a friend is what we in the US would consider a close friend. A lot of people around the world are really surprised at how fast and easily Americans make friends and how informal these friendships are. And international students will often remark that in the US, American friendships seem very superficial and that they all seem at like an acquaintance level instead of a good friendship level. And so this is pretty interesting. And also there's differences within ethnic groups in the US that different ethnic groups have different meanings attributed to different kinds of friendships. Now, in terms of dating or being in romantic relationships, most cultures generally stress that there's some degree of openness, shared meaning, and that people are in agreement about where the relationship is. In terms of picking who to date, Americans tend to emphasize physical attraction and love and passion, whereas other cultural groups may not feel that way. Maybe they're more invested in if their family likes this person, and that might supersede if they're physically attracted to that person, which might be surprising to some of you guys, but it's just the way it is in a lot of other cultures. There's also a section on gay relationships, and that there's less research on gay relationships versus heterosexual relationships, but in general, gay relationships have existed in every society, in every area, across many cultures, all times. This is not something new. And that while there are a lot of similarities in gay relationships and straight relationships, same-sex friendships among gay men might be different than two straight men's friendships. Also, men in gay relationships often tend to seek more emotional support from their male friends. Often gay people might have close friendships in a way that straight people don't, because gay people are facing a lot of discrimination. And so having a tight-knit group of friends to be able to rely on is really important. Also, when people are communicating across differences, moving more generally to intercultural relationships more broadly, there are some themes that guide communication in intercultural relationships. So competence, basically, that you have unconscious competence, that being able to be yourself with somebody. Conscious competence is the level that you realize that things aren't really working out, but you're not exactly sure why. Conscious competence is when people are actively trying to learn and analyze and implement intercultural interactions. And then unconscious competence is when people are going really smoothly. Now, speaking specifically about intercultural dating, there's a lot of different reasons people list why they interculturally date. Maybe there's a physical attraction, maybe there's a personality attraction, but the different responses that people have to intercultural dating often reflect the social and political structures that they live in. A lot of people have been taught that it may be better to date within their own race. And so that is a huge barrier for them. And people that tend to be in interracial relationships also generally have been exposed to more diversity. So, for example, people that went to high school in a very diverse cultural environment are probably more inclined to be people that would interracially date than people that grew up in a very segregated area. Intercultural marriage is becoming more and more accepted in society, although I'm sure you could talk to your parents about this, and that just a generation ago it was even less accepted. Interculture or interreligious marriage even was a big deal 40 or 50 years ago, and it's really changed. A lot of reasons why intercultural marriages face challenges is because family and society pressure people in intercultural marriages about how are you going to raise the children, what language are you going to speak, are the children going to have a hard time fitting in? And so that puts a lot of stress on the relationship. There are 4 styles of interaction in intercultural marriages. One is submission, and this is the most common style, when one partner submits to the culture of the other. And this might be a little different in their private home, but this is in public. This style doesn't often work in the long run because it's hard for people to totally deny their background. Compromise is when each partner gives up some of their traditional cultural background to accommodate to the other. Obliteration would be when people both deny their past and form a new culture. So, for example, let's say a Jewish person and a Catholic person got married, and they decided to not practice either religion and join a completely new religion. Consensus style is based on agreement and negotiation, and it's the best of all the strategies, but it requires a lot of flexibility. Internet relationships is really an interesting topic that people sometimes will meet people from other cultures online, and so their relationships are a little bit different. So we want to be thinking about how society influences our views of these kind of relationships and what groups are least inclined. So, for example, African American women and Asian American men are the least likely to marry outside their cultural group. And that why is that? And we see it in the media as well. And we also want to think about this contact hypothesis. So people have to be able to meet and interact in a cooperative environment, enjoy equal status, and share common goals to be in a relationship. And when people are coming from different levels of privilege, can they really do that? So overall, hope this was an interesting chapter. Good luck on your quiz and reaction paper, and we'll see you next week.